Matteo to be with us in CPD.
You can start the session.
And let's start our panel with Massimo Torresi. Massimo will provide us with the GDPR conceptual framework for offered by synthetic data. Then please, Massimo.
Thank you, Eleonora, and thank you to Professor Aurucci and the other colleagues of the Polytechnic of the Torino for this panel, and also for inviting me on behalf of the DPS. And I'm very pleased, of course, to talk to also Carmela, Jerome, and unfortunately not with the professor, but we will listen to him. And okay, I will just start. And just to tell you that I will speak today in my personal capacity, and more than ever, let's say. Why? Simply because, I mean, there are no really official position I can share at this stage, framing, let's say, the use of synthetic data in the context of personal data and GDPR. So on synthetic data, for example, we organized an IPEN Internet Privacy Engineering Network event last year. We issued a little flash report on Texonar, a little foresight publication that we have just started. But the idea is just to tackle the issues to discuss, to be open to contributions. And okay, so being the first speaker, I believe I could make sense to make a little short introduction to the concept of synthetic data. And my colleagues that will follow, I'm pretty sure that they will go more in depth and instantiate also some use cases on that. Now, the expression synthetic data may refer to any sets, I would say, of data records that are not collected as a description of the reality around us, but they are artificially created. When we think of real personal data, for example, we might think of an hospital repository containing patients' records, describing and measuring the health of these patients, their expenses to undergo their treatments. On the other hand, when we think of related synthetic data, instead we think of records containing the same kind of information, but created from an algorithm that instantiates the records following some criteria or a specific model, and that as such, I stress as such, does not directly, that record, relate to any real individual. But then why using synthetic data? So synthetic data may be used, for example, because we don't have at disposal enough real data, we need more data of the same type and structure, or, and you know, we are talking about that now, because we want to avoid using real data such as personal data for compliance or ethical reasons. So, and of course, it makes sense to use synthetic data only if there is some utility, of course, in them. As we know, the artificial intelligence applications are there to infer unknown relationships between data, to be able to understand the reality, support decision-making. And for example, a machine learning-based system used by, I don't know, health researchers can be trained on large amount of health records sourced by from hospitals, practitioners, of course, of patients affected by, for example, could be a specific form of cancer in the past. And the purpose of the system might be for researchers to find useful inferences between certain physiological and pathological features, and that specific form of cancer to find early warnings of this cancer and anticipate some treatment, for example. And all this data used in artificial intelligence, for example, to train machine learning models, is personal data, and of course is subject in the EU to the GDPR provisions. This is one, of the reasons, but not the only one, many organizations have explored the option to share useful data without sharing directly personal data, but rather synthetic set of data. So this data is usually created from machine learning generative models that keep statistical properties close to those of the real personal data used to generate the model, and then often retain, of course, a certain amount of utility as the original real data. Now, this synthetic data can be used for many purposes, including the very generation of other machine learning models. Now, it's not my focus to speak about the utility of synthetic data, of course, and I leave it maybe to some colleagues, I don't know, maybe Jerome. And I will rather focus on the possibly privacy advantages. Now, what would allow synthetic data sharing and further use without data protection constraints? is that synthetic data would be no longer personal data, since the single records, the single records would not relate to any identified or identifiable individual, and thus would be outside material scope of the GDPR. Now, in that case, data synthesis would amount to, I would say, a sort of anonymization technique. Now, many practitioners prefer using synthetic data as an anonymization technique rather than other traditional ones, like k-anonymity, aggregation, for example, to keep it simple, because it would keep data utility in many circumstances. And they claim that the risk of linkage, re-identification, or attribute inference, meaning that where you know that this record is in the original data set, you can infer other attributes of that record. So the risk would be lower than using the classical, I would say, anonymization techniques. But there is no common agreement on that. We will see that. And other organizations propose, for example, advanced pseudonymization techniques that could be used also in the AI context, reportedly bearing less risk than synthetic data. Now, what can I say about GDPR and material scope more than this? Now, from the work program of the European Data Protection Board, if you look at that in the website of the EDPB, there are in particular 2 guidelines planned for the future. They are working on that, I can witness, that can directly contribute, I would say, to the overall debate on the role of synthetic data and research, for example, in data protection regulation. So the first guidance are the guidelines on the processing of personal data for medical and scientific research purposes. So this is in the making, and this is public because it's in the program. Again, the other one are the new guidelines on anonymization and pseudonymization, taking over from the old, working party opinion of 2014 on anonymization techniques. So I would say most probably the latter one, I mean, the guidelines on anonymization and pseudonymization will tackle all kinds of techniques for anonymization and pseudonymization. So there is good chance there is some words that there will be some words on the use of synthetic data generated by machine learning models, for example, trained with personal data. And certainly there will be criteria for further assessments. Now, how do synthetic data relate to the GDPR material scope? Is synthetic data record personal data? Does it relate to identified or identifiable individuals? Now, as I said, in principle, unless the model suffers, a real sort of overfitting, meaning that it will reproduce somehow the data it was trained with, and not just the statistical features, that should not be identifiers or quasi-identifiers, almost coinciding with the training data. Yet the possibility that this synthetic data do not deviate enough from the original data exists. Now, also because I mean, in a nutshell, also as a non-scientific yet good sense approach, we might say that the more the synthetic data keep the features of the real ones, the more probability exists that a successful privacy attack can succeed. Now, to look at the material scope, we know that recital 26 of the GDPR looks at the means reasonably likely to be used in order to verify whether something could be, an individual could be identifiable coming from the data allegedly relating to that. Now, based on this, I'm wondering, I would say, whether we will ever have, a definitive statement in the law on whether synthetic data may be considered as anonymized. This is not the role of GDPR. GDPR is a general law, is technology neutral, and it shouldn't, in my opinion, also tackle these specific technologies. But I would say that technology-related legislation, let's think of the AI Act, for example, or the Data Governance Act, for example, or provisions on specific data spaces, the health data space, for example, could support this challenge via the use of, for example, of implementing acts, but also of EU standardization activities as they exist. They are provided for in the AI Act. So these might contain in the future some contextual obligations and recommendations, not only as to the effectiveness, I would say, of the very data synthesis as such, as a possible anonymization techniques, but also with regarding to accompanying further safeguards. An alternative would be the definition and use of codes of conduct. So codes of conduct are certifications based on Article 40 and 42 of the GDPR to define the use of synthetic data in certain precise, specific contexts. Again, furthermore, the future regulatory sandboxes of the AI Act could also be sort of, I would say, useful test beds for the use of synthetic data in well-defined use cases, and contribute also to, to get a bit of, of closer interaction, reciprocal understanding between the experts and the regulators. Nevertheless, we believe, as far as the regulatory sandboxes are concerned, at least for the AI Act, that the legislator has not yet clarified very well the role of them, the purpose, and the limits of this kind of tool. Nevertheless, I'm going to conclude, and we believe as a regulator, I would say that it's always essential for organization using synthetic data to be accountable for the effectiveness of the technique, as it should be for any other anonymization techniques, of course. And it is essential to accompany this measure with also other technical organizational safeguards to mitigate the risk of a privacy attack, based, of course, on the evidence that comes from science. Any relevant supervisory action from the regulators, of course, will certainly take account of the level of accountability and overall assurance from the data controller. But I'm finishing with a little big news. Why I'm saying the little big news? I mean, a few days ago, the Council has approved the Digital Governance Act after the Parliament already did. So the act is finalized. I think it's just missing I don't know whether they signed it, to the President of the Council and of the Parliament, and it will be published on the official journal. Now, the Data Governance Act sets up mechanism, just to say for those who haven't followed, to facilitate the use of certain categories of protected public sector data, including personal data, regulate the use of data intermediaries, sort of new business model services that are there in order to make intermediation, I would say, between data subjects and possible use by private companies, for example, or others, of their personal data in allegedly trustworthy way, and also what is called regulate as a third element, the trustworthy data sharing across due in what is called in a jargon of the Data Governance Act, the data altruism. Now, why I'm saying there is a news? It's a news because recital 7 of the Data Governance Act is the first piece of EU law, as far as I'm aware, I don't know whether others could tell me something different, that explicitly mentions synthetic data. So it's the reason explicit mention of synthetic data. And it's very interesting to look at that, because it doesn't, it doesn't speak about that as a anonymization technology, but it talks about privacy enhancing technology that can help mitigate the risk together with other, with other accompanying safeguards. So this is something new. We will see how it works, and that's okay as far as I'm concerned. For the time being, I would stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Massimo. And now we are ready to hear from Jérôme Bellegarde what are the benefits and the potential of synthetic data generation to alleviate not only privacy concerns, but also our AI concerns. And we will present 3 practical cases that we are very curious to discover. Please, Jérôme.
Oh, thank you very much. And many thanks for the organizing committee for inviting me to this panel. It is a great pleasure for me to participate in this year's edition of CPDP. First of all, can you see the screen? Can you see my screen?
I can see you. I can see your screen, and I think that also the audience in Brussels can see it. So please, you can start, I think.
Very great, very good, very good. So as I come from industry, I hope to offer a useful complementary perspective on the role of synthetic data in the actual deployment of AI technologies. And on that front, I would like to start by thanking Massimo for his insightful overview of both opportunities and challenges in front of us. In a way, he sets up the stage perfectly for what I have to say. In principle, when done properly, training machine learning models with synthetic data naturally promotes data privacy simply by reducing the volume of real data to collect. But in this talk, I will argue that synthetic data generation has additional benefits as well in terms of both training diversity and model deployment. And I'm going to illustrate these benefits through three practical case studies that we've dealt with at Apple over the past few years. But these are typical examples of the kind of use cases encountered in industry. So as we all know, the standard machine learning pipeline is to collect user data, train a model, and evaluate how good it is, which depends on two main data aspects. One is the volume of data available. On a log-log plot, as you see here, the generalization error rate decreases linearly with the size of the training data. And so the more data, the better. Obviously, we'd like to move the operating point as far down the curve as we possibly can. The question is which data? That's the second aspect, which is data diversity. Typically, it's easy to collect mainstream data, which is represented here in various shades of blue, but it's much harder to cover all the corner cases. After all, that's why they're called corner cases. And that's where data synthesis can help by complementing data collection in terms of both data volume and data diversity. The last aspect is particularly interesting because, of course, there are many variability factors that underlie data diversity. For example, the personal style of the users, the particular task being addressed, the semantics of the domain, the level of formality expected by the audience, the ambient noise conditions, the circumstances of the interactions, and so on and so forth. The list is long. Those factors considerably increase the combinatoric will be represented in the training data, which in turn can contribute to well-documented flaws in the resulting machine learning model like brittleness, bias, overconfidence, lack of explainability, and so on. The question is to what extent it may be possible to mitigate such flaws with data synthesis. And that brings us to the three practical case studies that I'd like to cover today, which will each illustrate a different generation strategy. The first one is language modeling for predictive typing with a strategy of targeted augmentation. Then we'll talk about handwriting recognition with a strategy of priming and generation. And finally, we'll cover swiping keyboard input with a strategy of adversarial style transfer. So let's get started. In language modeling, the corner case I'd like to illustrate is data bias, and more specifically, gender bias. As shown here in this example, a vanilla predictive typing model is very likely to assume that a surgeon is a man and a nurse is a woman, because that's the reality reflected in text training corpora at the moment. Historically, there's been a systematic gender bias in most professional occupations. Now, a well-established remedy to this situation is a so-called targeted augmentation, in which original biased text is converted into augmented reverse biased text, which is then added to the training corpus. The idea is to restore gender balance in training, so the model no longer singles out gender as a relevant factor. Of course, the success of this strategy heavily depends on the explicit specification of imbalanced targets, which is often tedious, as this example here suggests. In handwriting recognition, the corner case I'd like to illustrate is idiosyncratic user styles, spanning a wide range for pure printed to pure cursive handwriting. Here, each stroke is rendered in a different color for better visualization. So you can see many more strokes in the samples at the top than in the samples at the bottom. The synthesis strategy used in this case is called priming and generation. Handwriting is generated by converting text into handwriting strokes. And in order to specify which style to generate, the network is primed with a sample from a particular writer. The generated sample ends up copying style element it has just seen in the priming sample, even including, in this case, the slant of the horizontal baseline. This method is quite effective at generating a variety of realistic handwriting. Here are some examples of priming samples on the left and the resulting synthesized samples on the right. It's all reasonably convincing, except perhaps for the first example, where the user might have expected to reproduce uppercase. And that's the main tricky situation with priming, as it's not always clear what specific aspects of style are being primed. And that's what we saw with the slanted baseline a minute ago. Moving on, in swiping keyboard input, the corner case I'd like to illustrate is high path heterogeneity, which requires broad coverage in terms of the number of words supported and their associated path, not just in English as shown here, but across different languages and layouts, for example, here in Mandarin Chinese. To address such wide variability, we start with a simple synthetic path constructed from cubic splines here on the bottom left. The idea is to feed it to a deep learning model known as a GAN, for generative adversarial network. This model then transforms the original path on the left into the more realistic path on the right. This is done on the basis of the kind of human artifacts abstracted out from a reference corpus of user paths, like this one on top. This is the associated architecture based on a standard GAN driven by an adversarial loss. To make sure the generated path is still aligned with the right word, we add a so-called connexionist temporal classification loss, or CTC, as a constraint. And in addition, if an encoder is involved, we also want to make sure that we're able to reconstruct true paths via this reconstruction loss here. I'm not going to go into any further details, but we can talk some more during question time if necessary. This method is quite effective at generating a variety of paths, especially for words for which we don't have user data, as in these examples. They contain a lot more human artifacts than the original rule-based synthetic path, and thus come across as much more user realistic. Okay, so time to summarize the key takeaways. I've talked about synthetic data generation, not just as a means to increase data volume, but also as a way to expand training data diversity and speed up model deployment. In language modeling, data synthesis helps address the typical bias we observed in training corpora, such as gender bias in professional occupations, like the famous surgeon nurse example. In handwriting recognition, it helps make the model more robust to the large variety of idiosyncratic user styles out there. And in swiping keyboard input, it helps reduce expansion costs by minimizing data collection across multiple languages, multiple physical devices, and also associated keyboard layouts. So we can conclude that data synthesis has a useful role to play in alleviating well-documented AI concerns like bias, brittleness, and overconfidence. And all of that, of course, while preserving privacy. To wrap up, I'd like to emphasize that this talk has only scratched the surface when it comes to synthetic data generation, of course. There are many other situations where corner cases arise, some of which are listed here. So the combinatorics are definitely in favor of relying more and more on synthetic data going forward, which is ultimately good news for the responsible deployment of AI technologies. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jerome. Thank you very much. Now we are ready to listen from Carmela Troncoso something on the comparison between traditional anonymization techniques and the use of synthetic data. Please, Carmela.
So thank you, Leonora. I hope you can hear me and you can see me and you can see my slides. So coming back to a couple of things we have heard today, Massimo said that the idea behind synthetic data kind of helping with the Gdpr is because, as opposed to anonymization, records do not correspond to particular persons, and then we can say it's personal, their personal data. But he also said many times that the goal of all of this anonymization was to prevent privacy attacks and to prevent inferences and to prevent kind of discovery of data about individuals, right? And what I'm going to talk today is that our experiments and our studies actually reveal that synthetic data is not better at the second part than traditional anonymization. And for this, we have to talk a bit more about what synthetic data is, right? So we have the idea that synthetic data comes as this holy grail that is going to allow us to do everything. We just heard a couple of examples from Jerome here. And there's this idea that you will have perfect protection and you will also have the statistical properties of the data, right? So you kind of get the best of all of the worlds, like ideal. That's great. So the question here is, what is the privacy utility trade-off of this data? When we hear these things, we are kind of here at this place where we have a lot of privacy and a lot of utility. That's where we want to be. And that is in opposition to, as Massimo said before, traditional sanitization techniques like L-diversity, K-anonymity, and many others that we have discovered that if we want high utility, they end up giving you very little privacy. So the question now is, how do we evaluate this for synthetic data? Because so far, the only thing we have heard today is that records do not correspond to individuals, and therefore we can believe that there is privacy. But privacy goes beyond this thing. And how do we do this thing? Actually, in all of the chats that we have had now, we actually called synthetic data and synthesization an anonymization solution, right? We have this data that comes into a generative model that could create a synthetic data set, and then the belief is that the synthetic data will not correspond to this raw data, and therefore it is anonymized. But now we need to evaluate the privacy, kind of the privacy attacks of the synthetic, the same thing as we did before with anonymization mechanisms. And for this, what we can do is go back to the recommendations from the European Commission, Article 29 back then, like, can we prevent attribute inference attack? Can we prevent linkage attacks? In which, for instance, we can say, like the very famous case that demonstrated that K-anonymity was kind of not very good, because you can actually say whether a particular person is in the database, right? And then we need a way to actually compare whether this synthetic data is in any way better than what we had before. Like, the idea is not here, we have a new thing and then it's good or bad. What we are in the discussion here is about, for very long, we have tried to hand this perfect anonymization solution. It didn't happen. Is synthetic data better? What is the actual risk associated to publishing a synthetic data set that was reduced with respect to publishing the raw data set or publishing the anonymized data set as we had before? And for this, we have an adversary, and we need again to think, a lot of people in the literature think about this is an attack of machine learning, but it's not really that, right? We need to assume that the adversary would have the same information as they had before when we gave them a sanitized data set, meaning the output, the synthetic data. And which this we want to evaluate, is this better or not? And why is this important? Because it is important to realize whether the risk of, or the lack of risk comes really from all of these synthetic operations with a generative model and all of this machine learning and using a GAN, as Jérôme just said, or using whatever fancy technique that is your favorite this month, or it actually comes from the fact that in the raw data set, you already could not do privacy attacks. And actually the gain doesn't come really from all of these fancy techniques, it just comes from you not having a privacy problem. And again, the idea is here, we said before, we know that if it's a sanitized data set, we have a very small privacy gain, but we don't really know where the privacy gain states of a synthetic data set. And that is what we tried to evaluate with our work. And what we did is to compare what sanitization could give with respect to what synthetic data or differentially private synthetic data would give. So here we have a graph, and here I represent the privacy gain. So how much more privacy do each of these individual records have after I have applied an algorithm? Here, traditional sanitization, you can think k-anonymity and a bit of erasing things and making some attributes some coarse, like traditional anonymization techniques. In the middle, what we call a Bayesian network, which would be something a bit less fancy than the generative adversarial networks that Jérôme just talked about, but it still is something that learns the characteristics of the data and then outputs these new synthetic records that arguably are not connected to a person, but still we see that different individuals have different privacy gain with respect to an attack. Here we're doing the attack of, is this person in the database or not? And here to the right, we have what is called PRIV-Bay, which is an even more private version of a Bayesian net. Before Massimo said that there are people kind of proposing to put privacy mechanisms together. So this is where we put differential privacy generation together with synthetic data to get more privacy. And we see is that still then different individuals have different protection. Perfect protection would be here on the one. And what we see is what we expected before, which is the sanitization may give good protection for some people, but very bad from others, right? This is why for very long, we have not really used this kind of anonymization techniques, and why anonymization cannot really unleash the potential of machine learning and all of this very cool stuff that we have heard about in the two previous talks. If we look at the middle, we see that actually privacy improves, but we are kind of far from having perfect privacy. And importantly, and I want you to remember this thing, different records may have different protection, and we cannot know which ones are which. And if you go to the differential privacy, okay, that actually kind of gives close to perfect protection, is good. All of the records go up. So actually maybe that we actually have found the holy grail. But now let's remember why we're doing this. We're doing this because we want a data set that allow us to do the same thing as the raw data, right? Without the privacy problems. So we went and evaluated utility. And to evaluate utility, we went through use cases of companies that offer synthetic data, also other main users of this thing, like in the health domain, the financial domain, that really need kind of these machine learning models and they're desperate to use personal data and see on synthetic data kind of the future. And then we check like different kind of operations that all of these people want to do, such as machine learning. Does the data allow us to predict labels or predict things? It was similar to what Jérôme was saying in the previous talk. Does synthetic data allow us to produce better reports, kind of more fine-grained reports in which we can really kind of report kind of fine-grained columns for medical studies, for demographic studies, or like in the financial sector, for instance, very important outlier analysis. What characterizes a particular kind of fraudulent transaction? And typically it's very hard to have very big data sets because they're fully of personal data, they cannot be used for another purpose, and then they see synthetic data kind of the future. And again, the idea here is that the promise that we had is that we're going to have the same utility as when we have the raw data, because otherwise we're back on the sanitization kind of thing. And what we see here, this is another graph in which again we have the sanitization, so the traditional k-anonymity, Bayesian net, normal synthesization, and then these are these differential private methods, and the smaller this parameter epsilon is, the more privacy you have, right? We see it here, the privacy gain goes up. So this is cool because we see that indeed we can pull privacy up, but what we also see is that every time we pull privacy up, oh surprise, utility gets down, right? We have more and more and bigger errors. So there is no particular difference between actually moving to the synthetic data scenario and the sanitization scenario, because we can indeed take this sanitization privacy gain here and make it smaller by destroying more of the data. And then we would take our utility and increase the error. And we can do that. But we actually don't really have a way in which when we move to have better privacy, we don't have utility. And we have studied many algorithms, many implementations. We have so far not found anyone that doesn't actually fall into this very big problem. So what we kind of have here is that at the end of the day, for synthetic data, either you are in the same place of a sanitization, or you are in the very high privacy with very low utility. So this is not really what we were looking for, right? And just to come back to some of the comments that have been made now, first of all, we have the same limitations, right? We have the same trade-off. And this cannot become a general purpose publishing mechanism. And the reason is that we have also heard now that, you know, synthetic data can help you increase interpretability, for instance, but this is not really true. Like I have said many times, like, remember that different records kind of receive different privacy gains. And the truth is that we cannot predict which of them will actually be more protected than others. And that also means that we cannot predict which patterns will be preserved by the synthetic data. And that means that when we actually perform computations on the synthetic data, we may be making errors because some patterns may be more present than others, and others maybe have disappeared. There is no warranty that we actually have eliminated bias or that we have not increased bias. And studying this becomes extremely complicated because synthetic algorithms are not more interpretable, are actually less interpretable, because between the raw data and the sanitized data set, you put a lot of noise. Like to create the synthetic data, we actually have to extract characteristics, but then we have a stochastic process, a random process in which we create these new records. So I cannot see, and I would love to hear more insights from my colleague panelists about how these mechanisms that inserts noise that is actually not predictable and that really doesn't give me a better trade-off than sanitization can actually be that tool that is gonna allow us to do all of the things that we just heard. And with this very controversial statement, let me stop here and look forward to the questions and discussion.
Thank you, Carmela. Thank you for your impressive talk. Now we cannot hear directly Professor Pompeo Casanovas, but we can hear him by video. So I kindly ask the staff to put the video online. Pompeo Casanovas will discuss about synthetic data generation within the framework of legal governance.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It is a pleasure to talk about synthetic data in this panel led by Eleonora Bassi. I will talk in a video as the time of this roundtable and the trip to Europe prevent me from participating in a live way. Fortunately, I could register my contribution, and you will be able to discuss its content with Eleonora and my fellow expert panelists, Massimo Torresi, Jerome Bellagarda, and Teresa Stadler. I will bound myself to talk from a policy and legal governance approach. I will bring to this forum 3 ideas. First, synthetic data should be differently treated as a component of legal governance or as a specific instrument that should be regulated and monitored by its potential ability to cause harm, not only to protect, to cause harm, especially when combined with generative artificial intelligence. Second, synthetic data that is constructed using a particular data model, is not a panacea. It is not a protective tool per se, but only when combined with layers of complementary institutional protections with different levels and degrees of privacy. Third, these degrees and layers should be previously defined in advance, which brings about the need to specify which requirements should be fulfilled, which metrics should be used, and which thresholds should be defined. These latter issues, the thresholds, are of utmost importance to embed GDPR protections and the new Artificial Intelligence Act provisions into regulatory models and normative systems. It is my contention that risks cannot be completely minimized using synthetic data only. We should embed it into legal governance models the broader way. What does legal governance mean? Legal governance does not exactly equate legal implementation or application. It is a broader concept, being able to be formally built and applied from a set of social, legal, and economic sources to handle information processes in specific contexts and scenarios. It goes beyond merely submitting digital processes to the law, as you would see. To build some regulatory models for the Internet of Things, we usually start from a scheme that we believe useful to frame legal governance issues. We call it the meta rule of law, including hard law, policies, soft law, agreements and best practices, standards and protocols, and ethics. The semi-automation of legal governance is the next step, the creation of a regulatory interspace, bringing together all relevant stakeholders, including rulers, industry, and citizens. Especially ethics, not just positive jurisdictional law, matter in this regard. But, and this is important, a balance between the compulsory, so the enforcement, and the dialogical, so negotiations, dialogue, access of the rule of law seems unavoidable to be effective. Some kind of proportion is necessary. We could situate synthetic data within this life cycle. We are at the beginning. Standards are in the making, but there are no common standards and protocols yet. IEEE Standards Association has adopted a prudential view so far. There is a group focusing on synthetic data industry connections to build a community and discuss how standardization of this new technology could best be approached, working out the concept of fair synthetic data. But what does it mean? This is not a result to me, but this is an intuitive starting point. The US National Institute for Standards and Technology has linked from the technical point of view, synthetic data to differential privacy. Differential privacy, as you know, is a standard that protects privacy no matter what third-party data is available. 4 years ago, in 2018, the National Institute conducted a differential privacy synthetic data challenge with good results, but leaning on privacy, differential privacy. It's worth mentioning, however, that differential privacy is not the only approach. During the last 15 years, disclosure models and disclosure risk assessments have been fleshed out to measure safety in a masked microdata being considered for release. For instance, using quasi-identifier attributes to perform the record linkage. There are many attempts to do that, many proposals. I should bring to your attention a third element to complement it as well. Generative artificial intelligence. This has been pointed out by Gartner analysts focusing on the market. As of July 2021, Gartner Hypercycle situated synthetic data at the peak of inflated expectations. As of February 2022, Gartner analysts have described the risks as well. Among them, many risks, but among them I selected 2. The quality of synthetic data dependence on the quality of the model that created it and the input seed dataset, and the necessity to regenerate synthetic data if seed datasets change. Interestingly, Gartner analysts have understood that synthetic data from the broader point of view of generative artificial intelligence. That is to say, the techniques that learn a representation of artifacts from data and use it to generate new artifacts, new original artifacts. Generative adversarial networks and variational autoencoders are mainly used to do so, but this also increases the risk of misuse, deepfakes, counterfeit, and fraud. How are we going to regulate the generation of synthetic data? How are we facing this? Is there any regulatory way to evaluate, check, and monitor its legal effects? Is this related to embedding the protections of GDPR into apps and platforms? I think it is. And it should be possible to build up specific regulatory models using legal sources. The problem we face is that these sources for synthetic data are scarce, unequally distributed, layered, and in a preliminary stage. I have just shown that standards and best practices are not yet in place. Very few legislations mention synthetic data, with no case-based law, and they mention it en passant, occasionally, and related to another subject matter. For instance, the GDPR never referred to it, and the new EU proposal for AI regulation mentions synthetic data only once in Article 54b, when dealing with the conditions to set up sandboxes to avoid unnecessary risks. Recent provisions in USA also indirectly and directly refer to synthetic data, prohibiting deepfakes and the distribution of malicious synthetic media news. In addition, and this is one of the problems, algorithms trained with biases in sample selection typically fail when deployed in settings sufficiently different from those in which the trained data were acquired. We face this problem when working with data replicas in Spirit, a recent Horizon 2020 European project for fighting organized crime. We could not access to real data, kept in police databases. The policing dataset used by Spirit was a replica of the original data sources. We had the objective of embedding into the system privacy and data protection provision. We carried out multiple actions related to ethics and law, dynamic data protection impact assessments, ethical sandboxes, risk minimizing matrices and policies, and the privacy control toolkit, among many others. What I would like to highlight here is the importance of setting a hybrid integrated environment. We had to change lens and incorporate the pragmatic angle of the investigators using the system and their reasoning about possible suspects and their networks according to the processed data to be effective. Hence, to prevent them to use the system with all biases of the original datasets. We had to make some decisions about acceptable thresholds of risks, identity, vulnerable communities, and face recognition. For instance, we had to minimize the likelihood of biases and calculate the appropriate level of accuracy. And this is a problem. We followed generally what is called the middle-out and inside-out legal governance approach, set by Hugo Pagallo, Robert Madeline, and many other authors, including myself, in the Artificial Intelligence for People Smart strategy. This means starting from a holistic stance, setting middle ground, intermediate concepts to understand what should be protected and the ethical principles and technical protocols and standards that should be put in place. Again, a hybrid, pragmatic perspective in between machine and human understanding. I will finish summarizing and making some suggestions. Wishful thinking, but anyway, just to discuss. First, be specific. Consider context and scenarios. Adopt an approach that incorporates end users' behavior for the use of synthetic data, be they close to differential privacy or to disclosure models. 2, this is controversial. Heterarchy is preferable to hierarchy. Combine different legal sources, including the elements of soft law, mainly protocols, policies, and ethics. It is not trivial, it is not easy. We need to set preliminary models to do that. But these models are not directly compulsory. It's something that we have to discuss and we have to build up conceptually. This is the middle-out approach. Third, focus mainly on ethical principles. First, because they are not jurisdictional, they are more general. I would suggest explicability, so accountability plus explainability, to gain and to reach transparency. 4, set the conditions to build a sustainable legal ecosystem, not just the anonymization protocol and the implementation or application of rules, norms, or principles. For the field and data at stake, health, medicine, security, is better to know the field. So not going top-down, but middle out again. Fifth, test the accuracy and validity of the synthetic dataset against the requirement of the legal ecosystem as a whole, identifying and minimizing risks and setting up regulatory systems, not just against the seed dataset. Sometimes is not enough and sometimes is not useful. Six, define, finally, the empirical causal models, simulations, ethical and legal audits and validations using metrics and the appropriate acceptable thresholds. And I think that this is the most difficult thing, to set the appropriate acceptable thresholds to implement it. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you, Pompeo Casanovas, and thank you to all our speakers. We have a lot of food for thought and very different positions on synthetic data. Then we can start our discussion. I have to remind you that the session is recorded, and I don't know, I cannot see if there are any questions from the live audience in Brussels, but I think so. So please speak in the mic if you have some questions.
No. Oh, there we go. Hi. Hi. Michael Veal from UCL. Thanks for all the presentations. It seems to be really important to treat synthetic data very similarly to sanitization. And I don't know, in terms of the legal, we haven't talked too much about the law in this panel. In terms of the legal analysis we provide to sanitize data, we look at tests like those established in BREA, in data protection law, and we look means reasonably likely to be used. Does the panel agree that it's really crucial to analyze synthetic data in exactly the same way that we analyze sanitized data? And why would we make a distinction between the two when the legal framework actually quite neatly enables us to treat synthetic data as just another method of sanitization, really, and work from there and make sure we have the attackers that we're trying to model, we keep the equality between the data sets and the kinds of threats that they have access to normally in both the world of sanitized data and the world of synthetic data. Oh.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Or I think that this could be an excellent question for all our three panelists, but I think that maybe Massimo and Carmela could be the first to answer.
Thank you for the question, Michael. First of all, let me rectify again what I said, because indeed I had forgot the mentioning in the provisions on the sandboxes of the AI Act. But both there, if we look at both there and in the new recital, which is more comprehensive and sets synthetic data within another context in a wider context, a more comprehensive context of protections for personal data when sharing them. The legislator doesn't put synthetic data within the anonymization, talks about anonymization on one hand, and then it says synthetic data, maybe because they didn't want to enter into the technical details or the sort of classification. But I fully agree with what Michael said. At the end of the day, this is another technique for protecting the data through an attempt to anonymization at the end of the day. So I can't see any real differences in the reaction, in the regulation of that, but for the specificity of the techniques as such. But the concept remains the same. It is an attempt to anonymizing the data, as simple as that. It is done in a different way than in the other ways. I agree with Professor Casanova that, and as he said, putting thresholds in standards, in codes of conduct. Of course, codes of conduct will relate to standards. They will not invent the wheel as such. and good practices will be key, but will be the most difficult step to carry out. But I fully agree with the statement. I mean, I can't see any differences with the rest in terms of approach. Also on the regulatory abstract approach of the means reasonably likely to be used in order to possibly identify the data subjects, I mean, in abstract. Then, as I said, each technique has a different approach, but then we might find also a common denominator in terms of abstract probability, for example, sizing that could even be horizontal to the different methodologies. But I would frame it in the same way. Indeed, thanks.
So thank you for the questions, and thank you, Massimo, for the clarifications. What I can say is, from a technical perspective, indeed, this is the approach we try to take, right? Like when you have synthetic data, at the end of the day, you have a data set, and you run the same attacks. And we put a special effort on this idea of this reasonable means. And the attacks that we launch and the graph that you have seen, like they use the same information that we use on sanitization mechanisms. What we always had, right, the kind of attacks that we always launch is the same thing that we use for synthetic data. It may be that the technique we use for the attack is slightly different, right, because you're doing different things. But that technique of the attack, right, it's not really something that is secret. In fact, we have this thing, it is published, it's the code. You can download it from GitHub and run it yourself, which means that the effort or the knowledge that the adversary needs to attack a sanitized data set and a synthetic data set is exactly the same. So we thought that the particular attack was efficient enough on sanitization to say that this was not privacy preserving. It is the same thing for synthetic data. And now we may have to enter in actually these picky details that we are always shy and wrote about what is the exact gain where we're going to consider that is good or bad. But from the point of view of the technical ability and whether this is reasonable or not, if it is reasonable on one, it's reasonable on the other. And now we need to enter in a very different discussion that maybe it becomes very complicated, right? But this is maybe what we should try to actually kind of put off the table rather than telling them apart and trying to say these are different techniques, they need different information. No, they are exactly the same.
Thank you. Maybe Jerome would add something to reply this question, or please.
Yeah, I just want to perhaps bring a little distinction between whether the main goal is to sort of replicate the main statistics of the distribution, which in which case, of course, data synthesis and anonymization is essentially the same, because you're trying to get to the sort of the center of the distribution, if I may, the most frequent artifacts that are being produced. And what I was talking about previously, which is sort of more exploring the edge of the distribution, the corner cases.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. I don't know how much you heard. I must have hit the button as I was speaking. Sorry about that. I was just making the distinction between sort of the center of the distribution and the edges of the distribution. In the case of differential privacy and all of these things, the aim is squarely at replicating the center of the distribution. That's how it works. That's why we inject the noise. Hopefully, the noise will be such that you will get to the statistical properties while at the same time preserving privacy. But what I was talking about in my talk before is sort of getting to know the edges of that distribution. And by definition, since those are corner cases we're talking about, it's going to be very challenging to find data to begin with, that have these particular characteristics. And so in that case, I think that there may be a slight difference between anonymization and data synthesis, because it would be extremely challenging to find data to anonymize in the first place in order to generate to consider that region of the distribution.
May I ask a question? I'm not understanding this here, right? Because if you're saying that you're not using data because you don't have it to actually create those corner cases, and you're just modeling them from physics and from anything, then this is not a privacy problem. This is not even it's a very good use of synthetic data, but then we don't have any discussion here, right? What you're saying is you didn't even need data from the beginning. You can kind of create all of these, the pure synthetic data all the time, and then we have no problem.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that corner case arises from the interaction of different factors, right? Those variability factors that I was talking about. And so there are certainly a real case that could fall in that exactly that point, but it would be extremely challenging to find it. On the other hand, if we did find it, then it would mean it would be instantaneously identified as this particular person in this particular situation. And so therefore, there is a very high, actually, privacy risk if we could find this person in this situation. But because, at least from a practical point of view, it would be very difficult to find this person in the first place in this situation, we don't really view it as a privacy problem. We view it more as a robustness problem. We want a system that works for this person in this particular situation. And we'd like to sort of address that case ahead of time. So it has a relationship with privacy, definitely, because as I said, if we found this person in this situation, we would instantaneously be able to identify that person.
But how can you guarantee that your synthetic data about people actually represents people?
Well, in the situation that it's general, but in those 3 use cases that I mentioned, for example, the handwriting case, you could find a person who writes in this particular way, and so it's not inconceivable that you could find it. It's just that we haven't found this person yet, and so therefore we cannot. The issue is, what will the system do when it encounters this particular input? And we'd like to make sure that the system does the right thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Maybe there are some more questions from the public. Are there?
Hi. Yes, can I speak? I think so, yes. Hi, Andrea from Imperial College. Yes, I wanted to ask a question that really is a follow-up to what Carmela was asking. So it's not completely clear to me where the privacy problem, let's call it like that, lies in the use cases that were described by Jerome, because I think so the use cases are very interesting, and I think they are a clear example of how synthetic data can help, but I struggle to see exactly what is the privacy notion, let's say, that is being protected here. So I mean, for example, I can see that there might be a privacy notion at the data collection phase, but that is not addressed in the data synthesis generation, for example. Then there is a problem of perhaps how let's say the model is trained and whether it leaks information, which is basically what Carmela's paper studies, more like on the synthetic data that is produced by the model. And then there is a question maybe of the data that is deployed on the devices, for example, for to predict for typing assistance. So yeah, I mean, if Jerome could clarify exactly where the privacy issue lies. Thank you.
So fundamentally, when we're talking about machine learning-based synthetic data generation, that generation process is informed by some data collection. Some user data, where the aim is to replicate artificially some artifacts of the kind of which we've seen. If we haven't seen any particular artifacts, there is nothing to generate. And so this is a problem of possibly leaking information. If the artifact has been observed on just a particular person, for example, then just replicating that artifact would immediately identify the person. And so that's the connection. But what I wanted to emphasize in my talk is that data generation is not just a matter of preserving privacy, but it can be also a way to increase robustness across a number of phenomena. And also the fact that, of course, it reduces the amount of data to collect. And so generally, it just speeds up things for deployment.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. Can I add a small question? So does this mean that essentially the synthetic data that is generated is considered as anonymous from a, let's say, data protection point of view by Apple in the pipeline? Because otherwise, if the data is trained, in its personal form, then what is exactly the reason why you want to preserve privacy in the model if the model is used internally only?
So yes, the data, the generated data is considered to be private. However, as I said, it is informed by data that we collect. It's typically vendor collected data, so there is no privacy per se. It's not live user data that we don't collect. Basically the game is that if we manage to make the system more robust, that means that we don't have to rely on user data, on, let's say, live user data that we would have to collect otherwise in order to improve the system. So the thinking is that the more robust the system, the less live data we need to use. And in fact, our goal is not to use any at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have only 5 minutes, maybe for the last very, very short question. And please.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a question or an answer to the previous question. I think, sorry, René Mailleux from VUB, that the question is, like, maybe we have one conception of privacy where this method that were explained by Jerome doesn't help that kind of privacy, as in the original data that is used is as private as it was before. But I do think that if we have a broader data protection perspective, I think Jerome is kind of arguing that it helps the data minimization principle. So less other personal data has to be collected that otherwise would have been collected. And that in itself is also helping data protection. Jerome, am I correct in interpreting you in that way?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And also transparency, perhaps, because the data collection is done ahead of time with willing participants. And so later on, we can say no data is being used, so it's very transparent.
Hi, it's Michael Veal again. There's no one else on the queue, so I thought I'd ask another question, if that's okay, but to Jerome this time. My question is, it's interesting when you're looking at combining these corner cases together to finding corner cases that never existed. In social science, there's this concept called intersectionality, which is where effectively two different classes of people, say you could be black and you can be female. Well, actually being black and female has completely different characteristics in your life and affects you in a way that's much different than just having those two in an additive sense. You can add more characteristics and so on. How are Apple thinking about issues like that, where you would have these two corner cases, but actually just modeling them at the same thing might be totally different, and you might be really you might be out of the ballpark and in the modeling completely the wrong thing entirely?
Right, absolutely, and that's why I mentioned in the talk the combinatorics. It's really what the problem is. We can't possibly hope to collect data across all the individual combinations of factors. That would be tremendously expensive, perhaps even impossible. And so that's why we turn to data generation in order to sort of fill those blanks.
Sorry, but I guess the point is that you don't know what's in those blanks, and that those blanks are not necessarily an addition or a union of the two things that are those characteristics, and that's been well documented in social science. The experience of being a black woman may be very different from the experience being black plus being a woman.
Yes, that's right. So we would consider that as two, the three cases as three different cases. So either black or a woman or a black woman. Yes, those would be three different factors, three different combinations of factors.
Cesar from KU Leuven. I think when we talk about synthetic data, it comes the question of what kind of regulation do we want to have as regards personal data? And here I see two collisions. In the one side, we have the identifiability test. On the other side, we have a more conceptual and restrictive notion, more related to information theory, when we base personal data on information extraction. And whereas the law says that we should treat personal data from an identifiability point of view, then we have some guidance from the EDPB, EDPS, former Article 29 Working Party, stating that we should also consider information extraction. So I think synthetic data in that regard is just the cherry on top of the pie of an unresolved problem that we are still, as legal scholars, asking ourselves as to what should be the future of personal data. And I would like to have a strong opinion in the future guidelines on anonymization from the EDPS, EDPB, whatever, to have a position, because this is creating legal uncertainty to companies, and we don't know how to manage from a legal perspective this. It was more like a comment rather than a question for Adoresi.
I mean, I see your point, and it's not of an easy solution. I mean, in the past, for example, when there were also proposals on the use of non-personal data, we said, okay, well, at a certain point was a discussion of mixed data sets, but the mixed data sets don't exist. I mean, either you have personal data that could be mixed with non-personal data, and then together they are still personal data. But this is just one thing. And why I'm saying that? Because I'm assuming a clear definition of personal data here. Because at that point we were talking about the precautionary principle. It is clear that at a certain point there could be a precautionary principle as a matter of fact. But then as to that, saying that, to have a reasonable assurance of and legal certainty that the court doesn't hit you, let's say, at the end of the day, or the regulator, that there is a step forward that I'm not sure we can easily fix. It is clear that the future, in particular, when we come to this gray zone between personal data and non-personal data, will be somehow regulated by accountability and by specific, by law mandated, making use also of standards, as we can do in European regulation. For example, we can mandate standards from the three European standardization organizations, and the results, if welcomed by the Commission, and by the way, and there we can talk about governance of these kind of solutions, but that's another story. Massimo? And then will be part of the law. Sorry, what's going on?
Massimo, we are finishing our time.
Okay.
We have to. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we
understand where I'm going. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm over. I mean, I'm saying that we will need specific provisions for each and every of the different techniques in that sense. Otherwise, we don't go out. I mean, it's not sorting out this kind of.
Okay, thank you, and I'm sorry, Massimo, again. but we have to close our panel. Of course, the issues are many and many. We have to organize another panel and another conference, maybe next year again in CPDP. And thanks again to our speakers and to the audience in Brussels and to the staff of CPDP that organize the panel and the participation. Thank you again, and bye. Thanks.
Bye to all.
Thank you very much. Bye.